Here's the other sleeve gusset that I didn't do yet. I've actually started doing it, the other parts of the gusset. But what you do is, when you do flat filling, you're working with your seam allowance. The seam allowance is comprised of these two pieces of fabric where the two cloths came together. And if you recall one of the earlier videos, I sewed the two seam allowances together to make a seam. And we call it a seam allowance because you get a little bit of extra cloth there. So what we want to do is cut down one of these two cloths. Now when I do flat filling of these gussets, I like to flat fill toward the middle of the gusset. So here's the gusset, and I've already flat filled this side and this side, and I've started sewing this side, and I want to set up this side, the fourth side, for the camera. So I'm going to show you how that's done now. You're going to take your sharpest pair of scissors, and for me that would be this pair that I do most of my fabric cutting with, and you're going to cut down the seam allowance that's on the inside, toward the inside of the gusset, or toward the gusset. So of the two, that would be this one. So we're going to cut that down at least halfway. It could even be a little bit more than halfway. There we go. It's gone. The next step now is to pin the seam allowance. So to do that, I like to stick my hand into the inside of the garment, or the other side of the garment, which is why we left the side seam open, so that we can put our hand in there. So we'll put the hand in there, and with my right hand I'm going to turn that remaining seam allowance, fold it over, and I'm going to pin it in place. So there it is, I folded it over. Now I'm going to pin it, and I will tell you that I like to start in the middle of the seam allowance, of the gusset seams. I always start in the middle. So I'm going to pin that now. And I'll just finish pinning the entire seam allowance. I've got that seam allowance pinned down now. Remember, this is the inside of the garment. It's all pinned down now. I've turned the sleeve back so that it's right side out, and now I'm working on the outside of the shirt, not the inside anymore. And I've started to sew it. I've sewn that much already. I thought I would take a few stitches for you on camera. So as you go along, you need to remove your pins, obviously, as you proceed. So I'm going to turn it around and remove the pin that's in the way and try to hold it. Hold it open with my thumb. Okay, so we're going to go in. This is just a back stitch, or you can use the modified hybrid back stitch. You're going to go in and take your stitch. I'm going to see if I can get a little closer for you. So here we go. I'm going to take another stitch for the camera. Here we go. We go in and right back out. It's a back stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this stitch. The gusset is now fully flat filled all the way around. The other thing I wanted to show you was that where the sleeve attaches to the body, there is this seam allowance. right here. And I'm going to give it a different treatment. There isn't really a lot of fabric there left to flat fill with, so we're going to do what they did in the 18th century, which is we're going to put a fabric strap that covers that seam allowance all the way around, but we'll cover that later. For now, we're doing the side seams. So the side seam is exactly what it says. We left it open so that we could stick our hand under the gusset to sew with. But now we're going to close up the side seam now that the flat fills are done. So we're going to close up that entire side seam, and then we'll come back and flat fill it. We're going to pin all the way down the length of the side seam, except about 2 or 3 inches from the very bottom, and I'll cover that when we get there. Okay, the side seam is now pinned. We're going to go back to the top of it, and we're going to sew it closed with a back stitch. And I'll come back when I'm finished with that. Okay, this side seam is finished now. It's the straight the back stitch seam. I still have to come back and flat fill it. I'll show you how I set that up. Just like with the gusset that we've already flat filled, to flat fill the side seam, it's actually a lot easier because you don't have to go around those sharp turns. But we're going to divide the seam allowance, and we're going to trim the one side the direction that we want to flat fill toward. Seam allowance. So we'll just trim the seam allowance off right up there to the bottom of the gusset. Right up here. So this is the bottom of the gusset, and it'll be trimmed right up to it. Now we're just like with the gusset, we're going to fold over this other seam allowance and pin it in place. So here we are, we've got the one trimmed seam allowance and the longer one. We're going to fold that longer one over, we're going to tuck it under, fold it all the way over, and we're going to put a pin in there. And just like with the gusset, I like to start in the middle of the seam and work my way out. So there's another one. Then in that same manner, I'll go all the way up to the gusset and all the way down to the hem.
Let's get to this.
The side seam is now pinned, the flat fill. You can see pins all the way down the length, all the way up to the gusset. Right there. Now, down here at the hem end, I'm going to show you that. I only sew to within a couple of inches of the hem because I want to give that a different treatment. We're going to leave it open there, and we're going to put a little gusset right here, but I'll show you that later on. So for now, we're going to close up this flat fill. So I'm starting to sew this flat fill closed now. I'm working from the outside of the shirt again, and I'm doing what I call blind sewing, which is I'm reaching around, as you can see, so that I can, with my fingertip, find and feel the edge of the flat fill. Because this needle from the outside, I can't see it, but it has to go through the very edge of that flat fill. Anyway, that's what you do, and you work your way all the way down. Oops, there we go. Work all the way down, give you a couple stitches there, and then I'll sit down and go ahead and sew this closed. we've got the flap filling finished on the side seam now. So all done. So actually all of the flap filling on the shirt is finished. I had extra thread left over when I finished the flap filling. So I just started at the bottom hem. I came right down through here, this opening, and then I started going across the hem. And so that's what I'm going to be working on now. I'm just going to go ahead and finish hemming the shirt. That way all of the loose edges, all of the free edges are all closed up. The hem of the shirt is now complete. It goes all the way around, and even the little side slits, they're all hemmed. I've even done a bar tack where the side slit begins, and so that entire hem seam is all finished now. So now the next step is to put little gussets at the top of the side slit right here. This is the gusset on one of my older shirts. It's at that little side slit opening, and it just helps to protect it from splitting open. I don't know, I don't think they used these in the 18th century. This is a modern interpretation. So if you're someone who's making this shirt for reenacting where you have to be 100% accurate, I don't know that I would do this. Okay, here's the gusset at the cuff wrist opening right here. This is the wrist. This is the opening for the cuff, and so I've put gussets here. I don't know that they put those there either. So again, if you're a reenactor who's working towards strict guidelines, I don't know that I would put those on there. Just put a heavy bar tack where that cuff comes together. But I use them because the shirts that I make for myself, I do not use for reenacting. I use them for pretty much everyday modern wear. So I just go ahead and put them on. You can go ahead and make some and put them on if you want to, or you can leave them off. It's up to you. But I'm going to show you how I do them. To make these gussets, you're going to cut yourself out a piece of your fabric that's about 3 3¼ or so square, one big piece. And then you're going to fold it in half and just kind of crease a little bend on there. And then you're going to fold it in half again, like that. Then we'll open it up and we're going to use those fold lines to cut. I've got the 4 gussets cut out now, so all you have to do is just bend over each side, all 4 sides. Bend them over, give them a little crease. By the way, when you give it a little crease like that, they call that pressing. In modern speak, we think of pressing. You're going to have your shirt pressed or your slacks pressed. You think of somebody ironing, but they did iron in the 18th century also, but pressing was different. You can get away with just pressing something with linen because it wants to hold a crease. I'm going to just take a pin and put it in each one of those 4 sides. I misspoke, I actually pinned on 3 sides, and you're going to turn the top corner, or the corner you want to be the top, you're going to fold that over, and in effect you're going to be making a little piece of fabric that's like one of those Superman. You ever see the Superman costume? He's got that emblem with the S on his chest. That's kind of, oh, if I can get this to behave. Okay, so there it is. It's all folded together, and I've got it pinned. It's actually 3 pins, not 4. and I'm going to pin this to the shirt so that I can sew it, and I'll show you that. There it is. It's pinned to the shirt opening there, and I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'll be using those back stitches to sew that on with. I've got all 4 gussets on now. I think they turned out pretty good. So now it is time to turn my attention to the seam allowances of where the sleeve attaches to the body. And so you can see this sleeve allowance here. It's difficult to flat fell. Normally that's what you would like to do, but it's almost impossible to do. I have done it in the past on shifts, but I have a better way now, and I'm going to show you what that better way is. I've put this piece of fabric over top of the seam allowance. We're looking at the shirt from the inside, not the outside. And so this piece of fabric goes over that seam allowance. I think that you'd find this also on original 18th century shirts. I'm not sure what the name of it is. I've heard it called sleeve piece. So the sleeve piece is nothing more than a piece of the fabric that you've been working on, although it wouldn't have to be the exact same piece of fabric. I cut a piece out that's about 2 3/8 wide by 24 inches long in this case. And I also take the time to iron the edge over about 1/4 of an inch or so. Iron that over. And that's your sleeve piece. Now let me show you how to put that on. We're going to center the sleeve piece on, remember this is the inside of the shirt. This is the top shoulder strap that we put on much earlier, maybe back in December. So we want to center the sleeve piece on that. So you want to find the center and mark it. I like to mark it with a straight pin because it won't be on for very long. So there's the pin. And then we're going to take the sleeve piece over and center it this way on the shirt. And we want to cover the sleeve allowance. So center it this way and cover the seam allowance this way. So right about there is where we want to pin it on. I've got the sleeve piece pinned pretty much centered over the inside of that shoulder strap. Now I'm going to pin it the rest of the way around the seam that attaches the sleeve to the body. About every 2 or 3 inches I'll put a pin. I've got really bad light right now, but that's what I'm going to do, and I'll show you when I'm done. I've got the sleeve piece all pinned in place now on the one side. I'll do one row of stitches first, and then I'll turn around and come back and do the other row. But you can see how I've pinned it in place, about every 2 inches or so, approximately. And yeah, so I'm all set to sew this in place. I'll be using a back stitch, and I'll be sewing from the outside of this of the shirt. So let me go ahead and get that done, and then I'll check back in with you. The shirt is finally finished. So today I finished the buttonholes and the buttons on the cuffs. I do have 2 videos that we made earlier, maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, that I go into great detail on doing the buttons and the buttonholes. So I didn't do that for this video. I told you earlier in this video that I was working on the shoulder straps, the shoulder pieces. They're underneath, and they go all the way around to help hide the seam allowance. Otherwise, that's the shirt. Let's raise this arm, And there's the gusset. This is the gusset underneath. You see that on shirts and shifts. We're going to be making a shift next, and you'll see that again. This is the collar, and it's got a couple of buttons underneath on the collar, right there, if you can see it. So that's it, the completed shirt. Thanks for watching.
Pleats.
Oh, pleats in the back, yeah, the gather. It's actually a gather, not a pleat, right in through here, which we covered on an earlier video. Okay, see you next time.